Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome again to Syriana Analysis. It's a pleasure of mine to present to you this report. Actually, I wanted to post this report yesterday, but I was a little bit ill after a very hard training in the gym. I really felt like my muscles are hurting me, and I had even a fever. So I postponed this video for today, and we are going to discuss the International Criminal Court's decision to which issued an arrest warrant against President Vladimir Putin, and also I will discuss slightly the visit of President Bashar al-Assad today on Sunday to the United Arab Emirates. But to begin with, so we're not headed toward appeasement. We're not headed toward diplomacy. We're not headed toward a peaceful resolvement of the crisis and the war in Ukraine. We are headed toward more escalation. And the recent decision of the ICC is in this context. And I would like to explain to you why. First of all, I'm in no way or shape defending President Putin. I'm not paid by President Putin, and President Putin doesn't know me. And the only thing that I'm trying to raise here is the fact that this decision will escalate the situation in Ukraine. And why? And whether or not this decision is politicized or not, it's up to you. I will explain what happened, and then you decide by yourself. I'm not here to tell you what to think. So the ICC issued an arrest warrant against President Putin on charges of alleged crimes or war crimes in Ukraine. This is the report from the BBC, which details what happened. So let's take this look together. Putin arrest warrant issued over war crime allegation. The International Criminal Court ICC has issued an arrest warrant for Russian President Vladimir Putin. The court alleges he is responsible for war crimes and has focused its claims on the unlawful deportation of children from Ukraine to Russia. It says the crimes were committed in Ukraine from 24th of February 2022 when Russia launched its full-scale invasion. Moscow has denied the allegations and labeled the warrants as outrageous. So the first thing that we have to understand here, which also the BBC mentions in this paragraph, the ICC, the International Criminal Court, has no jurisdiction over Russia because Russia is not a signatory of the Rome Statute. Therefore, the ICC cannot ask Russia to hand over any of its citizens from Russia to the court. However, in my opinion, this also is mentioned in the BBC. It will hinder definitely Putin's visits to the outside world. And this is the main focus, in my opinion, of this arrest warrant, or the main reason or the main goal behind it. So let's take this scenario into consideration. Ukraine is not going to win this war, period. And sooner or later, Western governments had to deal with Russia. And if the Russian president is wanted by the ICC, that means if Putin visits, let's say, attended the security meeting in security conference in Munich or Paris or any other country that is signatory of the Rome Statute, the ICC can ask this country or government to detain President Putin. And this is the main issue here. So what they're trying to do is, by this decision, is to hinder or block Putin's visits to the outside world. Of course, in this regard, we have to know that the Russian side also believes that they can no more partner with the West. They consider them unreliable partners. Therefore, they are moving faster in having better ties with the rest of the world, such as China, India, Middle East, Africa, and the rest of the world. So the problem here is, I will show you the map now. So how many countries, for example, signed the Rome Statute? So this is from a Ukrainian account. So as you can see, the green countries. Okay, so the green on this map, all these countries who signed and ratified the statute, Putin cannot visit these countries. I mean, technically he can if there are guarantees from these countries to not arrest him, but it's a matter of blackmail, right? Imagine Putin is going to Portugal or trying to fly to Greece or to Australia or to Brazil. Brazil is a friendly country for Russia, so he will be blackmailed and he will be harassed and there will be problems. So this will, let's face it, isolate Putin from traveling or hindering his trips to the outside world. The rest, for example, the yellow, which is signatory that has not ratified, he can travel there. State party that subsequently withdrew its membership, he can travel there. Signatory that subsequently withdrew its signature, again, can travel there. Not a state party and not a signatory, he can travel to these countries. So this is the situation on a legal basis if Putin wants to travel to the outside world. But politically speaking, I want to mention here two things. President of China Xi Jinping, after he mediated between Saudi Arabia and Iran, and China is presenting itself as a power that can resolve difficult political and geopolitical conflicts between arch enemies such as Iran and Saudi Arabia. Therefore, Xi Jinping he has a plan to make a phone call with Zelensky, president of Ukraine, and he also plans to meet with president of Russia, Vladimir Putin, in order to mediate between them and try to end the bloodshed there. Therefore, this decision also comes at a time, so the context is very important, right? When there are attempts from the Chinese side to activate diplomacy between both sides. Let's remember in March 2022, when 1 month after the Russian offensive on Ukraine, there were the diplomacy was activated again, and there were talks between the Russian side and the Ukrainian side. And back then, there were the Brits who hindered and blocked the talks between the both sides. And later, Zelensky issued a presidential decree banning any sort of talks with President Putin, which could amount to treason, which means the person who is accused of talking with the Russians could be executed and even dead. I mean, one of the members of the Ukrainian delegation, which was present during this first meeting of the talks between Russia and Ukraine in 2022, in March 2022, he died. They killed him. They assassinated him in Ukraine. The second political case I want to mention here, it's really funny that the decision of the ICC came on the same day of the 20th anniversary of the illegal invasion of Iraq by the United States and by the United Kingdom and the rest of the allies. Is it a coincidence? Well, Franklin Roosevelt once said, in politics, nothing happens by coincidence. And if it happened, you can bet that it was planned that way. I'm paraphrasing him, but it's just the same meaning. So I don't think this is a coincidence. I think the attempt is here to erase the memory of the Iraq War, because history is very important for the people to understand the present times. So when you are reading the history and reading what happened during this time, during these 2 decades, and when there is an arrest warrant against Putin on the same day of the American invasion of Iraq and of Iraq, there will be an overlap of events. And I think it will bring the Iraq invasion to a second place, because the newer event always comes as a matter of, as a priority, or an event that you look first before the older event. So I think, yes, it is no coincidence, and I think the ICC decision here will definitely be an attempt to erase the memory of the Iraq War, which was illegal according to the UN. There was no jurisdiction by the UN. It was an illegal occupation. Over 1 million people died during the discourse of the war and the aftermath of the war, and 0 arrest warrants were issued by the ICC against the perpetrators of these war crimes and crimes against humanity in Iraq, right? Like George W. Bush, he walks freely. Tony Blair, the media is even trying to polish his reputation again and present him some sort of an expert on now the Great Reset and all this, the gang of Klaus Schwab. promoting for digital currencies, promoting for social credit system, digital wallets, and you can check this by yourself. And he's even promoting for digital IDs. So they're recycling and polishing his reputation and presenting him as an expert now. Nothing happened to him. Another thing that I want to mention here, which is quite important, the United States welcomed the decision of the ICC, although it's not part again of the Rome Statute, and it's even worse than that. So I have heard about this in 2005 when I was in the studying in university, and now I have sources about it. Actually, before the invasion of Iraq in 2002, George Bush adopted a law called Hague Invasion Act. We know that the ICC is in The Hague, right? And there is a law in the United States that states if the Hague or the ICC detains any American serviceman or servicewoman accused of war crimes, the American military has the legal right to invade the Hague, the ICC, and free, quote unquote, the detainees. So, US President George W. Bush, this is from August the 3rd, 2002. US President George W. Bush today signed into law the American Service Members Protection Act of 2002, which is intended to intimidate countries that ratify the treaty for the International Criminal Court, ICC. The new law authorizes the use of military force to liberate any American or citizen of a U.S. allied country being held by the court, which is located in The Hague. This provision, dubbed the Hague Invasion Clause, has caused a strong reaction from U.S. allies around the world, particularly the Netherlands. In addition, the law provides for the withdrawal of U.S. military assistance from countries ratifying the ICC treaty and restricts U.S. participation in the United Nations peacekeeping unless the United States obtains immunity from prosecution. At the same time, these provisions can be waived by the President on national interest grounds. The law is part of a multi-pronged U.S. effort against the International Criminal Court. On May 6th, in an unprecedented move, the Bush administration announced it was renouncing U.S. signature on the treaty. In June, the administration vetoed continuation of the UN peacekeeping force in Bosnia in an effort to obtain permanent immunity for UN peacekeepers. In July, US officials launched a campaign around the world to obtain bilateral agreements that would grant immunity for Americans from the court's authority. Yesterday, Washington announced that it obtained such an agreement from Romania. So what happened is in 2002, just before the invasion of Iraq, because there will be, of course, war crimes committed there, and it's an illegal war by the United States, this Hague Invasion Act aims at bullying, blackmailing any judge or any investigator from the ICC who dares to investigate American servicemen, and even from an allied countries, which means the UK or any other country that participated in the invasion. Australia, the United States will invade The Hague, the ICC, and liberate these people who are accused of committing war crimes and crimes against humanity in Iraq. Hypocrisy, of course. I'm just trying to show you the other side, which is now welcoming the ICC decision against the Russian president, but at the same time, they are one of maybe the only country in the world which adopted such a law that allows the our military to invade a foreign country and liberate their servicemen. And it never ends there, because there are so many things that the United States did against the ICC. And I will mention another example, which is from 2019. The United States will withdraw or deny visas to any international criminal court personnel investigating possible war crimes by U.S. forces or allies in Afghanistan, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said on Friday. So, these visa restrictions may also be used to deter ICC efforts to pursue allied personnel, including Israelis, without allies' consent. So it's not only about the United States, but also they are looking forward that these restrictions will deter any investigation from the ICC against possible Israeli war crimes against the Palestinians. These visa restrictions will not be the end of our efforts, he said, Mike Pompeo. We are prepared to take additional steps, including economic sanctions, if the ICC doesn't change its course. I don't know what to say about this, to be honest. If there is a medal for, and the word for the world's biggest hypocrite in the world goes to, it's the United States. I don't think there is a bigger hypocrite in the world than the United States in this regard. And still, it never ends there. The United States actually threatened to arrest the ICC judges and investigators if they issue any arrest warrant against the American citizens or American servicemen who were accused of committing war crimes in Afghanistan, for example. Take a look.
He used some very strong language about we will allow the ICC to die. To all intents and purposes, it's dead already. I think that will be news to Fatou Bensouda, the ICC prosecutor, and to many others who are involved in the court's work. Before I was in Washington, I was the Africa correspondent of The Guardian, and I interviewed the prosecutor and followed many of these cases in Congo, Uganda, Central African Republic, Ivory Coast, and other countries. There certainly were very animated debates about the utility of the ICC. Certainly, some critics claimed that it was biased against Africa. The ICC's defense was that, don't forget, many of the victims of those crimes were themselves African. And ironically, it's perhaps the ICC's attempt to expand its mandate and move to other countries, most notably these potential US prosecutions, that has really landed it in trouble now. And that may have been tough with any US administration, but especially with the Trump administration, it's really seen as crossing a line. But I think saying it's dying would be an exaggeration, but clearly with China and Russia also not signed up, it has a battle on its hands.
So there is a point of, it's a very important point here. The United States will use the ICC or will celebrate the ICC's arrest warrant against Russia when it serves their interests. But when they commit these crimes anywhere in the world, they are ready to defend their citizens and invade The Hague in order to liberate any American servicemen or even allied from Israel, for example. Which means we are basically living in a jungle. And since the United States is the superpower which manages the affairs of this world, of the world up until this moment, or now it's slightly, of course, diminishing, but still, this means that the international law, is being used by the United States against its enemies. And when it comes to applying or forcing these laws on the United States itself, then you cannot do that because the United States is the most powerful one and they can issue any law they want and they can use force even against an international court. And this is why there are so many incidents that people think and believe that what Russia is doing now in Ukraine is illegal, and they're not with the Russian offensive on Ukraine. They're not with the Russian invasion of Ukraine. They're not with the Russian occupation of territories from Ukraine. You can argue about the legality, with historical context and everything. Maybe you disagree with me or maybe agree with me, but I'm saying that there are people who disagree with Russia or what Russia is doing in Ukraine. But at the same time, because they know that the international system that we have is so unjust and so unfair that the vast majority of the world population were living under the mercy of the United States. It's a very greedy capitalist system. Its neo-imperialist tendencies through economic means and even military means, and the people want to be liberated. There are so many people who genuinely believe that they are choked by the United States, and this is true. Therefore, they are siding with Russia because of this. this is a point of this is a very important point that the people in the West or elsewhere who are for the United States need to understand before judging these people and asking them why do they stand with Russia in this war. And Russia is accused of sending or resettling children from Ukrainian territories into Russia. From the Russian perspective, the Russians say we are resettling them to safe places because there are hostilities there. From the ICC side, they claim that this is a war crime. Okay, this needs to be investigated. But there is a very big hypocrisy here that is you cannot swallow it. Any person who is neutral cannot swallow these allegations because the American officials, they came out and they confessed that they have murdered 500,000 children with sanctions. And Madeleine Albright, he came out like, I think this was in 1996, and she confessed on TV that they killed 500,000 Iraqi children, and she said it was a very hard choice, but the price, we think the price is worth it.
We have heard that 500,000 children have died. I mean, that's more children than died in Hiroshima. And you know, is the price worth it?
I think this is a very hard choice, but we think the price is worth it.
So the thing here is that when you have an official coming out publicly and admitting that their sanctions have killed 500,000 children and the ICC doesn't move and does anything, then the people will say the ICC lacks credibility. But if the ICC moved against the United States during these last decades where over 12 million people died by the American wars and persecuted maybe just one American official, then it would have gained some credibility. And then the people would not have now gone, let's say, very critical against the ICC. But when the people see that the ICC is doing nothing against these war crimes and the war criminals, and they're self-confessing what they did in the rest of the world, then they will question the credibility of the ICC and they will question anything, even if Putin committed this crime. So I'm not ruling out that Putin committed these crimes, but even if he committed these crimes, people will go out and defend Russia because the ICC's inaction in the past decades, or at least in the past 2 decades, 3 decades after the creation of the ICC, against the American, British, and other officials who committed war crimes, and they confessed that they committed these crimes, right? So basically, we're living in, as I mentioned, in a jungle. And one of the tweets that I liked, and I want to share with you, this account, which is truly publishing good stuff. If the International Criminal Court has done its job and sent George W. Bush, Dick Cheney, Colin Powell, Donald Rumsfeld, and Tony Blair to jail, we wouldn't have seen the destruction of Libya and Syria by Obama. Also, Obama, Biden, Nuland, and McCain would certainly have not carried out the Maidan coup in Ukraine in 2014. More importantly, Russia and Ukraine would have coexisted peacefully. So it's all on you, ICC. Your selective justice on behalf of imperialist forces has allowed chaos and destruction to continue. And I agree with him on this. So it's not only about the inaction of the ICC, but because this inaction had repercussions. If a criminal is committing a crime somewhere, let's say in Iraq, and he's getting away with it, why his successor would also be deterred from committing similar crimes, right? So when George Bush left, Obama came and he launched wars in Libya and in Syria and in other places. So he committed similar crimes in Syria. He committed similar crimes in Libya because there was no questioning or investigating the officials in the United States. So the inaction of the ICC didn't only tarnish the credibility of the ICC, but also helped other politicians to commit or encouraged other politicians to commit similar war crimes because their predecessors they didn't stand in front of the court and justice was not served. So these are very important things for the people to understand before discussing the legality, the context of this recent ICC ruling against Putin, or the arrest warrant. I want to mention two last things before I end up this video. So, as you guys know, Assad was in Moscow, and I was asking some sources about what they have talked. Of course, nobody knows what they have talked in detail. They had 3 hours of secret meeting, just face to face, Putin and Assad. But I'm hearing rumors that Putin told Assad, he never told this before to Assad, that he should not rely on the West's so-called humanity to lift the sanctions. And Putin told Assad that they will never lift the sanctions on Syria. We have to live with this fact, and that the allies in Russia, Iran, and China will increase the financial and investment support for Syria. And there were so many agreements being signed between the both sides, and Russia will accelerate its investment in Syria, and also the Chinese will jump the wagon. And they also told the Syrian counterpart that the financial system, global financial system, and the SWIFT system will change. And the Russians managed to circumvent the sanctions, and got rid of the SWIFT system, and they are building their own financial system. And the Chinese are also helping the Russians, and there will be a war, or we can call it an economic war against the dollar dominance over the global financial affairs. And the beginning of it is between Saudi Arabia and China, that Saudi Arabia is selling oil to China, and in return they will get paid by a yuan instead of dollar. So all in all, Assad was told not to rely on any Western country, and not to rely on any sort of rapprochement with the West. Not now, not in the future. The world is changing rapidly but surely, and Syria will be an essential part in this new multipolar system, because Syria has played an also essential role in diminishing the power of the United States in the region by foiling the regime change war in Syria, of course, with the help of the allies. But the Syrians fought against the American-led insurgency in Syria, right? So this was what happened between Putin and Assad. And lastly, I'm not gonna analyze this today's visit of Assad to the UAE. I will try to make another video about that probably tomorrow. But today Assad is in the UAE on an official visit, and there was a big celebration in the UAE, and the reception was very, 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 I would say, honorary. And there were fighter jets from the Emirati side accompanying the Syrian presidential plane, and they escorted him to land in the UAE. But one thing I want to mention, that this was the first visit of the First Lady of Syria outside of the country on an official visit. He accompanied President Bashar al-Assad. And I'm going to show you just the photo, and then I will comment on it, because it's very important for us to remember what happened a few years ago. So this is Asma. She's walking down the stairs on the plane, the presidential plane. This is her, in my opinion, very elegant and very lady. And I said, many who call themselves journalists, including in Germany, wished her death from cancer in 2018. Today, Asma al-Assad accompanied her husband to the United Arab Emirates. So what happened basically, I will show you again my tweets. So this is an article published in the Bild magazine in 2018. Okay, in English says, in German, darf man sich freuen, dass Syriens mörderische Mutter Krebs hat. So basically, in 2018, when Syria's first lady was diagnosed with breast cancer, the German magazine Bild published an article expressing joy at Asma al-Assad's illness. The magazine titled the article, "Can we be happy that Syria's murderer's mother has cancer?" Further in the text, I quote, "And in all honesty, a thought is not far away, no matter how shabby it is, namely, that cancer hits the right one." In the print edition of the bill, the question is asked, is this God's punishment for Syria's murderous mother? Today, after President Bashar al-Assad's official visit to the UAE, and the First Lady accompanying him, the karma, in my opinion, has done its natural work. I'm not surprised by such an article published in the German media or mainstream media. In my opinion, German mainstream media is a worse version of the American mainstream media. It's even more ridiculous here. But sometimes I think when such people write such articles, we just have to wait and let the karma do its thing. And now, after how many years? 4 years, 5 years for this article, she recovered from cancer, and she is now paying official visits with her husband to the outside world. And these people who wished her death probably will be bitten by similar karma soon. I don't know. Let's see. So, I've been your host, Kyo Kalmasena of Syriana Analysis. Thank you so much, guys, for watching this report. And thank you so much for your support and for publishing my videos on your social media accounts. And if you want to support my independent commentary work on YouTube, please become a patron. Link in the description below. And see you next time.